Bible study, one of the young men heard us and came down and told the wives, you might as well plan on staying here a while because the men are talking about politics. And politics, whether we believe it or not, is very important. And I'm not going to get on a hobby horse about politics so much, but just to give you an understanding of how important politics is to you and I just want you to take notice of who is in power in the country of the United States of America. I want you to take notice of those who are making decisions for yours and my life. These people in power have been put there by people of the United States of America. People that are uninformed, people without a care, people that are apathetic about political power is a result of what we have today. And why we see so much of anti-God, anti-Christ relations in this country. That's enough said about politics. It's an eye-opener, and if it's not, it should be to you and I. Politics is very important, as it was to the Jew of the day that Jesus was on this earth. The Jews were looking for a political kingdom, their kingdom, known as Israel, the promised land in which they knew their ancestors had come into and given to by God. And the Mosaic Law, they knew that that was given by God. They celebrated it every year on Pentecost. They were looking for a full restoration because the day that they were living in Jesus' time, there were pagans ruling over them. Just think about their history. Think about what happened in just a few centuries before Jesus came to this earth. There was an evil emperor who came into the temple and truly committed the abomination of desolation in the temple. They brought a pig in, and they sacrificed a pig in God's temple. Daniel prophesied about that, but we also know of another prophecy that's parallel to that and what is going to happen in the future whenever the Antichrist does the same thing. And so you have to understand something about what was going on in their minds. Because they also had the 70-week prophecy that also is found in the book of Daniel. And don't think for a second they weren't counting the days and the years. And when the King of Kings, whenever the Son of David was going to come in to Jerusalem. So many times without having information, so many times at just at face value, we want to sit back and we want to judge a certain group of people for the way they responded and the way they acted. Now, I'm not defending them in any way, shape, or form for how they treated Jesus, but I will say this. They were looking for a political restoration, and they weren't counting the days. Because Daniel gave specific days and time of when the Messiah would come into Jerusalem. And guess what? When Jesus came into Jerusalem, whenever he entered to what we know today as the triumphal entry, what we know today, and when we see that, where they were laying out palm leaves, and many people do the Palm Sunday thing, and we know that whenever he came, if you count up the weeks on the calendar of that time, it comes to exactly when Jesus entered into Jerusalem was exactly when Daniel prophesied that he would. So you got to expect. On one hand, you have to expect that they were looking for a political king to rise up against Rome and to overthrow them and give them back their land. That's what you have to expect. Now, folks, think about that today. Think about our condition in our country. Think about what's going on in our country and how even today, and folks, don't get me wrong, it's just a wonderful thought to know that we could vote somebody in, that we could pray for it, that some Christian man that would be strong in his beliefs, and he would stand up and he would be elected and he would actually help bring this country back to its former glory. And believe me, I pray for that. I pray for our political leaders. I pray for things to get right in this country, because we are going so far left that it's almost too far. I can't put the word in there, almost. So I leave us with no hope, and I don't believe we're without hope, because there is Jesus, there is God. Billy Graham said it a few weeks ago. But we must also understand something. That the kingdom that was prophesied about, the kingdom that Jesus came to bring, was not a political kingdom. For full political restoration is a grand thought, and would be wonderful to live in a totally restored country, bringing it back to what it was supposed to be. But you have to understand something. The kingdom in which we want to live in, the kingdom of what we are looking for, has to have a spiritual renewal, has to have a spiritual restoration that has eternal rewards. But where it has to do, or where it has to begin in the heart of man. And folks, even with a full political restoration of this nation, there will still be wickedness, and there will still be wicked people. And folks, the event preceding, the event that's going to take place, that is going to bring restoration, Jesus tells us about in Matthew 24. And there's a lot of events, things that's going to take place. And it is going to do a big shakeup. It is going to be a great changing. There is going to be a lot of things take place. But folks, for us to decide and for us to have some understanding about this kingdom, you first must understand where you are, where you stand today, whether you be on the right or the left, not politically, but spiritually. Now, this kingdom of heaven Jesus talks about in Matthew 25. Let's go to verse 4, verses 1 through 4. The kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. Now, as we discussed wisdom, here wisdom is discussed, even and explained through prudence. These wise virgins, look what they did. Jesus said, now we have to, before you get into any more of the details, before you get into the parable, he sets the stage here. He tells them about these 10 virgins. The wise virgins, look what they did. They had their lamps and they took oil with them. You might wonder, what does that mean? What does that stand for? They were prudent in that they tended to their responsibilities. You see, folks, while we're waiting for Christ to come back, we too must be prudent. And we must tend to our responsibilities, not what you think somebody else's responsibility is. You must tend to your responsibility. And folks, taking that oil meant that they cared about what the responsibility was, because they did not know when the bridegroom was coming. Does everyone know, or does anyone know, what the responsibility was? These virgins. Do you know? The responsibility was to light the streets. You see, not like today where we have street lamps. We have pole lights, and we do not have to worry about lighting the streets. But their responsibility was to take their lamps and to walk ahead, and they were to, whenever the shout of the bridegroom coming, they were to have their lamps ready, and they were to have the oil, and they were to trim their wicks, and they were to light their lamps, and they were to walk out and light the streets with their lamps. That was their responsibility. Seems menial, doesn't it? But folks, you need to know something. Whether you think that task is menial or not, it does not matter. The matter of the fact is that they had a responsibility. And folks, for you to have some understanding about your responsibility, whether great or menial you think it is, God has given you a responsibility. And folks, it is up to you to respond to that responsibility by being prudent and taking care of and tending to that responsibility. You see, these wise virgins were ready at all times. They had oil in their lamps, and they had oil with them, extra oil, just in case the bridegroom didn't come before that first that first oil of lamp, oil in that lamp ran out. And so they were wise, and they brought oil with them. In other words, they were prepared. Folks, how prepared are we today? When the call comes to us, when the call comes to us to take action, when the call comes to us to respond to what God has for us, how prepared are we? Or do we say, well, let me go call someone else. Let me call the pastor. Let me go call someone else. Let me let someone else do it. Folks, God has given you responsibility to tend to what He has called you to, not someone else. I heard a lady tell a pastor one time, she stood up and said, Pastor, I think you need to go to Africa. He said, well, you're going to have to go along with me too. She said, well, why? Because obviously you heard God speaking and calling me to do that, so when I get over there, I'm going to need you to tell me what I need to do when I get there. Ooh. Hold the brakes. You know? And folks, sometimes that's what we do. We want to pass off the responsibility to someone else when we know God is telling us to do something, and we're not prepared. We're not reading our Bibles. We're not praying. We're obviously not sometimes going to church. We're not doing what God has called us to do. Folks, in order for us to be ready, we must be prudent. We must be prepared if we care at all about our responsibility. But you see, the actions, as the old saying goes, speaks louder than words, because the foolish, look what they didn't do. You see, they didn't take extra oil with them. They weren't prepared. They actually, I believe, they actually despised the calling on their life. They actually despised the bridegroom. They actually despised all of that. And I believe there's people in the church that's a